Next submission is submission 78, and that is John Lawson, who is sitting out in sunny Ragland, I'm guessing.
Correct. Correct, Arte. Yeah, I'm following really on the heels of the previous speaker, who was curious as to how you'd reached your decision to charge us a range of amounts for public transport, because some people are going to be paying $11.50 and some are going to be paying $278.88. And it seems to me that we're all getting much the same benefit because most people don't use the bus, as he was pointing out. And also looking at the figures, the particular issue that you're looking at is whether people in Hamilton should be charged on the basis of their property value or a per capita amount. And since 74% of the properties in Hamilton are worth less than the million or so of the median value, it seems to me that a lot of people are going to be paying rather more than maybe is fair, considering this is supposed to be based on fairness, amongst other things. I also look at the way that you've apportioned charges for the Wharakawa Coast drainage scheme, and that the region, the rest of us in the region are paying 30% of that cost. And I can't find any figures as to what the proportion of public transport is, but it looks as though 30% is probably not what is being paid by those in the further regions as compared with those in Hamilton, because there's a lot more people paying that 278 in Hamilton than paying the 1150 in the far corners of the region. But of course, over 98% of journeys in Waikato aren't made by bus. So the reality is that, as the previous speaker was saying, most people don't get any particular benefit from the buses. But I do note that in your agenda it says providing efficient and effective public transport is an important step to enabling transport emissions reduction, which is true, but it's an important step, but it hasn't actually been taken, as some of the questioning and answers in the previous session have established. Because in particular, I'm concerned that we're being charged that amount of $76.69 in Raglan, which is the same as the amount that's being charged for those with a much better bus service like Cambridge or Tuamutu. And it seems to me that if we had the same bus service, we'd have a lot more passengers. Because before the changes were made, if you look back at the first quarter of 2024, Raglan at that time had 22,800 passengers, Cambridge 2,500 less, and Tuamutu 300 more. Sorry, my maths is that wrong there. 230 more. But the changes now are showing that there's big increases in the numbers of people using the Cambridge and Tuamutu buses now that they're running hourly and now that they're using electric vehicles. And it also seems to me that we're missing out here in Raglan because you look at our permanent population, which is a bit less than 4,000, whereas during the summer, the daytime population is probably well over 20,000. So it's comparable with the towns which have got an hourly bus service. And if we're going to be paying the same rates as those towns, then it seems to me that we ought to be getting the same service. It's also there seems to be an odd issue where you're looking at what you're calling unserviced areas, and they're paying half the rates, whereas some of the unserviced areas like Tamahiri and Whatawhata in fact, have the same bus service as the other areas which are paying twice as much. And it also seems to me that if that's going to continue, then maybe the buses don't need to stop at places like Tamahiri and Whatawhata, but could just run express and probably save about 5 minutes each way on their journeys. And the other issue which I wanted to mention was the amounts that are being paid by ratepayers for, in the case of Raglan, we've got a whole series of roundabouts which are being planned by the district council, looking to pay about $500,000 or more each, whereas the cost of the Raglan Hamilton bus at the moment this year is $141,000. Which could be paid for many times over with even the cheapest of those roundabouts. So I'm just wondering whether it's possible to take account of the fact that ratepayers are subsidising cars rather more than they're subsidising buses, despite that statement in your agenda about the effect on emissions reduction. And of course, you've also got a submission from Tiako just to the north of Raglan, which correctly point out that they have no buses in that area, and yet they're paying $38.35 to have no buses, whereas Te Araha, which has a few buses, pays $12 less, $26.84. I just wonder whether these represent fairness. So essentially, that's my submission. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? I suppose a question that I've got, John, is are you familiar with the total mobility and the community transport being proposed to be included in the package that is delivered through this public transport rate?
I don't know all the detail, but I'm certainly aware of those services and that there are changes being made. So those seem good. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
As indeed does restoring bikes on buses. So thank you very much for that email too.
Yes. Yes, fantastic. Any questions? No? Hey, thank you very much, John, for the effort you put into putting together your submission and taking the time to appear before council today. I know you always take a very interested view in what happens at your local councils, and certainly from Waikato Regional Council's point of view, we always appreciate your input.
Like previous submitter, I'll be interested to see the explanation for that massive difference in the amounts that we're paying. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for that, John. All right. Councillors, and just following up on the question that was asked of Deputy Mayor Angela O'Leary when she presented the Hamilton City Council submission. The question was asked about the support for their submission at their meeting, and Deputy Mayor has sent through the minutes of that meeting, and that submission was unanimously supported by all councillors at Hamilton City Council. So just so everybody is aware of that. All right, Mr. Chief Executive, would you like to give us your submission?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes.
Could I just clarify in terms?
Yes. Yes.
In terms of our debating or discussing or questioning this particular submission, what's the rules around that at this time?
How does that go?
I think similar to elsewhere, questions or clarification.
Clarification.
There's an opportunity probably tomorrow during deliberations to have more discussion, and I have put out a pre-meeting discussion on a few other matters that you might like to be aware of when considering the matters that you're going to hear tomorrow as well. So, Madam Chair, just ask Janine to present the submission on my behalf.
Very good. Do we only give you 10 minutes as well?
10 minutes is plenty, thank you. I'll try and speak really slowly. Yes. So,
You're speaking to the
so I'm speaking to
CE submission on page 45 of our agenda.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. Yes, so the CE submission, I guess, presents an opportunity for staff to request changes to the draft budget that you had approved back in February, just as new matters emerge. The report has been presented to show, I guess, those matters that staff have identified and the impact of those, which pleasingly is a reduction in the total rates revenue required of 678,000. So bringing the increase in rates revenue from current ratepayers down to 5.4%. But against that, also noting a couple of matters in response to council's own processes that should you proceed with those, would require funding, but within that overall envelope that's been created. So in summary, the key matters covered in the submission, if I just run over those very quickly. There's a couple of proposals in here around the bringing in-house of services that have previously been contracted out, specifically in relation to plant pest officer roles. So the remaining 4 plant pest officers that we contract out propose that they will be brought onto staff, and in doing so that achieves a saving of about 417,000. Additionally, monitoring around whangamarino is currently contracted out. It's proposed that that work is brought in-house, and doing so also saves 147,000. We've taken a look at the performance of the primary industry compliance program and have noted that because of delays in that program, there is an accumulation of targeted rate revenue within a reserve, and so proposed to release some of that funding, $190,000 next year to help alleviate those rates, but doing it in a manner that doesn't create any future rating shocks for ratepayers either. Staff were in the process of, or are in the process of, developing a business case to support the continuation of the Te Huia service. Additional funding is flagged within the submission in relation to that, both in terms of increasing costs for the preparation of that business case, as well as a reduction in forecast subsidy from NZTA. And we also note in there the bringing forward of the national ticketing system by a year. Finally, from a staff perspective, just to note that the proposed infrastructure capital program for 25-26 has been revised down. So while the total spend over the first 3 years of the LTP is the same, the program for next year will be lower than forecast in the LTP, with the 26-27 year likely to be higher. I think that reflects a more doable program of works. In relation to the council requested or driven changes, we note in there there's currently a draft CE KPI in relation to the development of an energy strategy. Staff believe that some external support or expertise will be required to deliver that, and so we've noted $150,000 in relation to that matter. And then the other point was in relation to resolution from council in February for staff to report back on the establishment of a research and development fund or funding approach in relation to flood protection and drainage activities. So there's a proposal in here as to how we think that could work. Effectively, the setting aside of $250,000 per annum of general rates funding into an R&D opportunities fund, to create a fund of up to $1 million that could be utilised for research and development. Now, part of the benefit of it being general rates funded is that it wouldn't actually need to be restricted necessarily to flood protection and drainage. So if there's other opportunities that present themselves across council's business, that fund would be could be utilised for that. We note that the genesis of that whole conversation was in relation to a particular piece of technology, a water siphon, that should council wish to proceed with that particular initiative further, the $250,000 annual operating contribution wouldn't be sufficient to meet council's contribution. So any additional funding over and above that would need to be sourced, and it's suggested that council's prior year surplus may be a source for that additional funding, noting that Kānoa has also been approached in terms of some match funding. So we would be leveraging central government funding as well. Madam Chair, that's probably a quick run through. I'm happy to take any points of clarification from councillors.
Councillor Kneebone.
No, thanks, Janine. Just a clarification, please, on the R&D fund. All good with that, but I don't recall, other than an official briefing one morning on the water siphon thing, any sort of direction being given on that, or have I missed something? Yeah.
Was discussed in the annual draft annual plan meeting, and a request for staff to come back through this process with an option for how that might be funded.
Yeah, it was more about, I mean, I didn't get to that water siphon unofficial briefing thing, but I would have thought it once the fund's established, there'll be a bit of a process to identify which projects sort of made the cut and which didn't. Yeah, if that made sense, but I might have missed something, but apologies if I have. Yeah.
Just through, Madam Chair. That's correct, but some things have run ahead, including an opportunity that could exist for Kānoa funding, which has meant we've had to move to put that in while we have this other wider discussion. And look, this is one of the matters I would quite like to discuss tomorrow.
Mr. Clarkson.
Yeah, my question really is around on the same lines, in the sense that I've been involved in many a research and development fund, and I know what happens if the specifications and conceptual framework is not in place before one starts. And I can't see what I would consider to be something of that standard in this paper. And I'm asking the question about what other aspects of a business case development would occur, and you may be answering that question tomorrow morning. And also, I'm assuming that if a bid has been made to Kānoa, then there may be some elements of that that would give us some comfort that we were heading in the right direction. So I would be, wanting to see the bid that's gone to Kānoa to see whether that has a research and development framework of sufficient quality before I would be prepared to vote on an issue like this. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think the former comment that you made around, is there a framework of research and development? I'm not sure that we have that level, but I think in terms of what was put forward to Kānoa, we'll get that for you tomorrow morning.
Councillor Nicol.
Thanks. Yeah, tomorrow morning when we talk about that, if you could touch on whether any other regional councils are playing in that space, or whether the regional sector in a partnered approach to sharing the risk has been thought about. But my questions actually, one is around the national ticketing system. I just recall from the Public Transport Subcommittee on Friday, there was some discussion about how there was a delay in the ticketing system, but then I'm reading here that it's been brought forward. Just want to understand which way around it is, really.
Have I got a red light over there? I can't tell.
I have now.
I've got a speaking order, so go ahead, Phil.
I think it's fair to say, as I said last Friday, that the programme reset that's being led by the National Governance Group is still underway. We were aware that most of our funding, if not all of our funding, was in that 26-27 financial year. Just a few months ago, we were likely to have it in place within the next 6 months for this region. The thing's swinging around all over the place. the reality is, at the moment, all of our money is in the 26-27 year. We need to have some funds next financial year in order to be working hard to deliver the product, whether it's launched, within the next 12 months or shortly after. At the moment, we're constrained because there's very little money next year available as things stand. So moving that money into next year allows us to keep going, whether the launch date ends up being before June 2026 or shortly after.
Okay, thank you for that. And my last one was, I'm fully aware there are some councillors who really like to squeeze the FTEs in this organisation, but you've brought us in paragraphs 9 to 12 some significant reduction by bringing things in-house. Just keen to understand whether we could have a conversation about that in detail at some stage around the opportunities going both ways. Because if we can find 417,000 here and 147,000 there, in that way, I'd like us as a council to have a good understanding of whether going one way or the other on this actually saves us more money. So it's more of a direction to consider for future rather than a question. Thank you.
All right, I've got Councillor Mahuta, Councillor Dunbar-Smith, and Councillor Smith. Councillor Mahuta.
Just to continue on the questions around Para 30 Research and Development Fund. I think we've gone to the fund without agreeing to the knowledge strategy of council. Gone to how to fund the knowledge strategy rather than consider what needs to be in it. And I'm saying that after a season of playing in the Rivers Institute with the university. So we went from in-house science to disbanding that to trying to buy science from the thinking community, the NIWA, the university, to we're going to do something again. And I just want to be really clear that whatever we do, does it within the infrastructure that exists within our region. It's our knowledge gain. It's done with everybody else mapped in, like River Authority, whomever else needs this information. And that we are set up really well with the new institutes of bioeconomy and science and the new Institute for Earth Science and Public Health and Forensic Science. So again, want to do it, want to understand why we're doing it this way and why it's key and integral right now. So that's that one. And then, yeah, with you, Jen, I want to unpack why the Environmental Monitoring Officer is the next thing we do in Whangamarino. Just want to understand why that's key and being recommended right now. Because having more information has only increased the workload around Whangamarino and the planning workload, but it hasn't caused any new actions. So again, that's towards tomorrow's discussion, not required. Yeah.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
I've got 4 questions. Firstly, bringing in the biodiversity and the Whangamariro staff in the house is saving $500,000. Where else can we bring staff in the house? I mean, that's at a huge amount of money. Well, precisely, but why have we been overpaying for so long is a question. So, yep. Question number 2, regional transport connections. I'm concerned that the business case for Te Huia has gone from 200,000 to 450,000 cost and wanted to know why.
So the creation of a business case at all is something that the agency has only recently advised us is required, and it's now formed part of the package of deliverables we have to achieve in order to get into the room for a conversation about the future of the train. We had rightly worked on the assumption that the agency would therefore pay a portion of the costs of that. Over the last couple of months following the creation of the annual plan consultation draft, they've now been very clear that at this point they are not prepared to fund any of those costs. So in order to achieve the requirements of the agency's decision-making process, we've put to you that we think we need to fund that work in order for it to achieve the requirements of the future decision. Now, there's always a chance that they could come to the party later on, in which case those costs would not be incurred. But we felt the only opportunity was to use the CE submission to bring that to you now for conversation.
2 points on that. One is it was indicated that staff are doing this report, so are there contractors doing it? Question. And the business case from NZTA was going to provide 140,000. So why is it not 340,000? Why is it 450?
The work that we were looking to do in-house was not this business case. This business case could cost us up to $1 million probably. We increased the local share cost up to 450 on the assumption or the basis that that would allow us to get most of the work, well, a good chunk of the work done in-house, but then bring in specialists where required to do pieces of the work. So there is a detailed demand forecasting model that we need to bring in that will help us understand where growth along the service route could occur, for example. Now, these are all
So just butting in, because I mean, obviously, right now councillors, we're just sort of giving some questions that we want further clarification on, and some of these questions may take a little bit more to bring together a fulsome response. So I want staff to feel free to say, actually, we'll bring additional detail tomorrow. I do think that this is a useful process, though, so that we're giving staff a heads up on what we want to dive a little deeper into tomorrow. But I don't want people answering questions without all the facts in front of them in order to do so.
I understand. It's just my worry is you just said $1 million, not 450,000. So, but we can move on.
We could spend a lot more than that, but we won't. We'll yes.
Yeah.
We'll bring you some information on that tomorrow.
I notice in 21, the national ticketing system is going to cost 1.29 million, and we're planning to use council's share of the reserves with no impact on rates. But that's for this year. What about subsequent years? But we won't have necessary council share. Is that going to increase rates?
I don't think that statement is specific to that year. This is the establishment of the system rather than the running of a system once it's in place. So this is about establishing the transition to national ticketing. So these are one-off costs.
So it would be a one-off cost. And finally, in terms of the Research and Development Opportunities Fund, given there's some queries about whether it is a fund, it's got a fund process, and it's specifically in the first instance looking at water siphon technology, has anyone looked at whether it could come from targeted rates from the people who would benefit from that rather than a general rate and a specific project rather than a fund?
Through the chair, can we come back on that tomorrow? That has been considered.
Right.
And the complexity of it being a trial with potentially, if it's successful, regional benefit to come from it, that the targeted ratepayers shouldn't be funding on their own. So we can come back with some commentary on that.
Great. Obviously, there's a fair few questions around that, so we'll spend some time on this particular item tomorrow. Oh, Councillor Smith and then Councillor.
I'm okay with being a what?
Oh.
Thinking on the fly. It's all good.
Okay. Thank you. If I can go to regional transport connections and build on what's already been asked. So I accept that there was a long-term plan discussion which was consulted on. So we've had an explanation why it's gone from 200 to 450 to 1 million and now 1 million plus. So whose decision has it been to fund the 150 from carrying it over from 2024-25, and is that from non-surplus amounts or from some particular budget? So that's one question. NZTA have said that they won't fund the business case. Reading between the lines, I think that's a clear steer about their future position, sadly. But have we got a mandate to spend this money without asking the community if it wants to spend this amount of money. We told them it was going to be $200,000, from $200,000. And within 18 months, we're talking more than $1 million. That to me is either been a misleading of council or a complete and utter, I'm not sure that I want to say it, but the reality is, how can it be so wrong 18 months later, even if you allow for the 140,000 that you budgeted on coming from NZTA? So this Te Huia is fraught with problems, and I know there's issues around the ideology from one particular national party. I'll say it, the Greens have thrown a spanner in there about Te Huia and the future of it. So my concern is getting further into this business case and asking the community to spend more than $1 million on something that is not certain. So where's the mandate to use additional rates, which says the 140, which will need to be funded through rates? Where's the mandate? Because we had the LTP discussion around a figure.
Can I just get some clarification on the $1 million? Because now all of a sudden we're talking about $1 million. Nowhere in this paper does it say $1 million. And I just want to get, before we get too hung up on that number, I want some clarity.
That's the director's own words, Madam Chair.
I understand. So I'm just asking for some clarity from the director around that.
So the numbers in this report are the numbers for the decision making. My reference was that there are other regions who are spending $1.5 to $3 million on business cases, and they are funded in part by NZTA. We're in a position here where late in the piece we've been told that we are required to do this business case work, which was not in our plan, and at the same time the agency is not prepared to fund 50% of it, which is what's led to the increase in cost.
Just in response to that, Manager, can I ask for clarification? Is any other region funding a train service? An additional train service? The business case is there. So you've got Te Huia, which is a trial. The others, like the Manawatu service and others, are they introducing new services for any business cases?
The business cases I'm referring to relate to public transport services and infrastructure in a general sense.
I think Te Huia is a little bit different, and that's why it's been.
Oh, so some of those would be rail related, yes? Or no?
There are Wellington spent millions in order to attract the Lower North Island rolling stock and rail network improvements funding, and that was all business case related. That would have been multiple millions of dollars. The ones I was referring
But that's not what we're proposing.
No,
We are
at
not
all.
proposing spending $1 million on this.
No, the numbers
Okay,
in the
so
report.
just so we are all clear, that is not what the proposal is. Before that starts to grow legs. Yeah,
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 thank you for clarifying that.
We're back to the figures that are in front of us.
Definitely.
yes.
It was an example.
Madam Chair, if I could just confirm, the CE submission is as it stands in front of you.
So can I ask then, now that that's been clarified, the comment in the ending paragraph 20, the $140, which will also need to be funded through rates, is that new money? Because I think the end of the report says this is all cost neutral anyway, or slightly less.
Yes. So through the chair, yes, that is. But with the savings that have been achieved in other parts and other changes that are proposed, there's funding available to meet that additional cost.
Right, thank you for that clarity. I just wonder whether we are being naive, because I think maybe this is for the deliberations, but we're being, I think we've been sent a signal.
But the additional cost that is being requested through the CE submission is the 140,000. Is that correct?
No.
Plus the increase in.
Is the
250 plus 140.
240.
No, I want to, let's be clear. What is the additional cost that's being asked is what?
So through the chair, there's 100,000 of costs. So there's an additional 250,000 of expenditure, which is assumed of 150 of that will be funded through savings in the current financial year. So there's 100. And then there's also the reduction in NZTA funding of 140. So there's $240,000 of additional rates funding
240,000.
that's being requested through that change.
240,000. And those are general rates?
That will be general rate funded.
General rate. Did you want to add something?
Just to be clear, in the submission, there aren't hidden costs. We're being very upfront and putting it on the table of what a need is. And the signal from council has never been to not pursue a business case for the future of Te Hui. It's always been the expectation. And that is what the cost of it would be. And I think that what we're suggesting is we could do a full-blown version, or we could do a good version with the trimmed down costs. And I think that's the proposal that's in front of you.
Great.
Thanks for
Okay.
clarifying.
Councillor Nicol.
You've got to.
I was just going to, sorry,
Sorry.
through you, Madam
Yes.
Chair, just one more comment in terms of the agency's reticence. I don't think that the writing is on any wall, to be honest. The reasons that they have given are that their entire programme is locked up in the RONS funding decisions that are being made by the board in June and July. So they have been doing work for 6 months, creating a package of bids that will go into their total funding pot for the allocation of money to take forward this Roads of National Significance programme nationally. As a result, there's been virtually no release of any money for anything anywhere else in all of that time, while they've been trying to understand exactly what they will require. We will get clarity in exactly what headroom is available after the board have made those decisions. But for the annual plan process, these decisions need to be made now. There is no guarantee of any funding, so we need, again, to be transparent with you, and this is what the dollars are in this report.
Jen.
Thank you. My question was for Janine around the corporate section under 17B, talking about a new population growth reserve fund. I was just because I remember somewhat the SIPO review at the start of the training, but can you explain to me what the difference will be of having a new reserve fund versus just going into the equalisation reserve, which was, I thought, trying to do the same type of thing? Just want to understand it well. Yeah.
So through the chair, the equalisation reserve serves to manage the ups and downs of the investment fund return. So where you have a good year, pops of money in. When you have a bad year, water, you take the money out of that. So that funding sort of provides that ballast in terms of balancing those returns out. What the population growth reserve will do is ensure that in addition to inflation proofing the fund, the value of the fund will also increase with growth in the population that it's supporting, so that the return that's available today is truly equal to what would be available in the future. At the moment, we inflation proof, but on a per capita basis, you could say that the return is actually decreasing.
Thank you.
What it will do is it does slow down the members of the Finance and Services Committee will know from time to time we've ended up with a deficit in that equalisation reserve. By providing for growth, it will slow down any recovery of that, noting that that had been going pretty well probably up until the March quarter, and should be back on track, I would hope, with April results anyway.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Chris.
Light.
Microphone.
Sorry. Janine, just for point of clarification, I want to make sure everybody understands. Business case that we're talking about for submission to NZTA is going to be 450,000. You've found some clever ways to fund that,
But it's, at the end of the day, it's going to cost ratepayers 450,000. Is that right or wrong?
Yep, I'm getting nods from my left.
Maybe I just clarify, is it a suite of business cases or is it one business case, Phil?
We reported to the PT subcommittee last Friday that there are 3 key tasks we have to complete in order to be in the room for a conversation about Te Huia. One is a 5-year review document, which sums up the delivery of all of the KPIs and measures over the last 5 years, and it's an extension of the 2-year review document that we did some time ago. The second is short term. What are the options for the continuation of the service? And that's 3 options: is a status quo, running peak services into Strand and then having all other services terminating at Pukekohe, or having all services terminating at Pukekohe. So that's a business case in its own right. Then there is the long-term future of the service, which is what we're talking about here, which is what are the options for purchasing rolling stock, and should we be going into some kind of special vehicle with government to own and fund those? What are the commercial operational ideas around whether Auckland Transport should take over the delivery of this service in the long term? How would that happen? From an economic assessment perspective, there's a load of demand forecasting required that will give us some future growth models around the value of building stations in Pokeno, Tuakau. There's a range of detailed work that effectively is the 5 parts of a full business case. And what we're talking about here is that last one, really. We've got a lot of work to do between now and December, and then between December and April next year. That effectively all comes to annual plan decision making around willingness to pay from this community, as well as trying to get contributions from others. We've got 2 business cases and a 5-year review to write and submit. There's just a lot of work to do.
Madam Chair, I'm trying to establish what it's going to cost us to provide a business case to NZTA to justify the continuation of Te Huia past June 2026. That's all I'm asking for. Secondly, we're told that we're going to have to buy, we've seen in our long-term plan that we're going to have to commit $100 million or whatever it is to long-term replacement rolling stock. How much is that going to cost? That'll be another, if I'm hearing Phil correctly, that'll be millions of dollars. Like, we're kidding ourselves. This is a serious amount of money being put into business cases for something which may not even exist after June next year. So I'm really concerned about spending this amount of money on ratepayers' money.
So we're not to deliberations yet.
I know,
So
but I'm
we're
just
clear.
trying to make councillors understand
So-
what they're talking about.
But if you've got if you've got specific numbers, questions, detail that you need before we enter into deliberations tomorrow, now is the time to put that on the table so that we can bring it back.
So 450,000. So
We'll get for tomorrow a clearer breakdown. So councillors can. I've got Ben.
Yeah. So firstly, you've talked about 3 business cases. Are any of them going to be done by consultants, or are they going to be done internally?
Sorry, I just need Noel, can I get
It's something, it's a question for tomorrow.
Right. Okay, that's fine. And just to clarify, and here again, the point of the 450, it's just slightly confusing. So between 200,000 to 450,000 is obviously 250,000. 150 will be funded by carryover. The remainder will need to be funded via general rate, so there's $100,000. In addition, NZTA have confirmed they will not fund the business case, which means 140,000 will also need to be funded through rates. That's the also question in there. Makes it seem like there's 140 on top of that.
So through the chair, that is, I think, what I had clarified before, that there's an additional $100,000 of expenditure, And then there is $140,000 of recovery from NZTA that we had assumed that they will now not contribute. So the ask or the impact of this is 240,000.
But there's already assumed 150,000 of funding and we carried over.
Correct. And the question has been asked by, I think, Councillor Smith in terms of the approval process for that. So we'll come back on that.
Right, so there's 240,000 plus 100
Assumed to be
50.
carried over. Yeah.
carried over. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smith. Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, I'm just asking for some simple tabular arrangements of the data that we are trying to understand at the moment in a sequential order, so we can actually, the problem at the moment is we have a narrative which sort of flicks from one point to another. And when you come to it, you know, as we have, it's just a little hard to follow. So let's just get it down on some simple tables and get it sorted, and we'll be fine tomorrow to work our way through it. Yep.
All right. Any other points of clarification or questions? Or anything that anybody needs to see tomorrow to inform their decision-making process? Nope. Banana cake?
I guess I'll just flag that on the Wharekawa Coast one, looking at the report, there was a decent analysis on an option 1A and 1B, but there was no analysis on 2. And I'm mindful that the Hauraki District Council one has thrown a bit of a spanner in, which caused A and B to be created. Just tomorrow, if we could have a bit of detail on what happens if people prefer 2, because I didn't find that in the paper. To the extent it might need to know. So just a flag. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Oh, Councillor Cookson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just, with the business case for Kanoa, it's a pilot, not a trial. I think that's important. It was a pilot.
I think we'll be getting further detail.
Yeah, I hope that wording's used tomorrow instead of trial.
All right. With that, councillors, thank you very much for your attendance today. I appreciate it. And so we will adjourn the meeting at 3:06, and we will reconvene tomorrow morning. At what time are we reconvening tomorrow morning?
9 a.m. for a meeting with myself, I think.
9 a.m. Well, the council meeting will reconvene at 9:30. And we'll have just briefings before that. Good. Thanks, everyone.